All right, everybody. Wanted to do a little review on the Strider SMF. This is, man, I'll tell you what, this is a real disappointing knife. I hate to have to do this, and I generally feel pretty bad about giving negative reviews, but this knife is atrocious. If this ever left my shop personally, this would not fly in the slightest. I know every one of my customers would send this knife back. I don't understand how anybody would accept this knife as it is. Now, I have to say, this did come from a trade. The guy neglected to mention, he sent 2 knives and neglected to mention that they were heavily used, which in my opinion is a no-go, and these will be going back to their owner. And I will be getting my trade back. But this is in just appalling condition as it sits. Not necessarily from use, but I believe this is an endemic issue to the knife itself, because I have experienced these issues with a few other Striders. Now, this is better than some because it doesn't exhibit the crack that most Striders get. And I repeat, most. I'm talking like 85%. That in my experience, I experienced this where when you have this this little pin on most of the traditional ones, the older production Striders, this actually was a press-fit pin, and it would cause stress fractures right here on the steel. You see it on a lot of the older Striders. It is totally endemic. This also still has the issue where the blade protrudes into the lanyard loop. So it's quite common for Striders to actually cut their lanyards. This is a design flaw. It's been a design flaw for years and years and years. Strider has never addressed it. This is a knife that's been in production for almost 20 years now, and it has never been addressed. Microtech addressed it when they did their version of the SMF or SNG. They actually did address it. They moved the lanyard hole because Microtech cares about that kind of thing. Strider, on the other hand, does not. So they have decided to let this be the status quo, and they are not addressing it at all. You can see where the blade protrudes into the lanyard loop hole, and yeah, that's unacceptable from a design perspective. Again, if this was on one of my knives, people would absolutely complain about this. So, holding them to the same standards that somebody holds me, that's definitely the case. So what am I just totally appalled by? Well, those things, but also the blade centering. Now, I would say that it, would be the pivot, but I actually have a spanner wrench for a Strider, and I actually went down and I tried to adjust it, and I could not get it to center up. So this is the centering, and I mean, again, if this was on one of my knives, this would never fly. The reason it's off-center is because the pivot hole is incredibly overboard. The tolerances on this are just atrociously loose. I took a micrometer, and this thing is just, it's like 0.025, which doesn't sound like a lot, 25 thousandths. That doesn't sound like a lot in terms of overboard, but trust me, it translates into a massive amount of extra slop in the pivot. You basically can't tighten this thing up. The other consequence of that is when you have your pivot overboard, you can never get a good lockup. So, hear that? I hope you can hear that. Rattling. That is because the timing on the frame lock is not actually able to engage the locking piece right there. I could fix that by bending the lock over, and if you flip this knife open, it does seem to at least engage at some point, but the moment that you start putting pressure on the blade, it actually basically kicks the galling from the titanium off of the steel, and then it's back to rattly again. And the only reason it's actually locking up well when you flip it open is because you're actually getting the titanium to gall against that hardened steel surface there. So eventually that will break, because titanium will only take so many repetitions of that before it starts to round over and peen. And it also tells me that Strider doesn't even carbide plate their locking surfaces. So, we're talking about a knife that's several $100s, and they can't even be bothered to do that. At least Chris Reeve bothers to heat treat their surfaces. This is a knife that's every bit as expensive, if not more expensive, than a Chris Reeve Sebenza, and it is really, really bad. I'm just thoroughly disappointed with this knife, and Not a cheap piece. I wouldn't care so much about the the use and whatnot. If it had been described to me, of course, I'm not happy about that with the seller. That's kind of a interpersonal thing. I'm not going to out him just like that. But I would say that the knife itself exhibits not only design flaws but also manufacturing defects. This knife should have never left Strider's shop and should have been taken care of by them. I'm sure I could probably reach out to them via customer service and they'd be more than happy to replace it. However, I am not going to be doing that. I'll leave that up to the owner because, like I said, the condition of this knife was not described accurately to me. So I'm going to be sending this one back to the guy who owns it, and he'll be sending me back my knife. But I'll tell you what, if you're interested in a Strider SMF, I'd think about the kind of manufacturing that you're seeing here. Overboard pivots is, in my opinion, that's something that's more endemic of somebody who is, and Strider's obviously a competent machinist. He knows what he's doing. The fact that he either doesn't know about run out or doesn't care about run out on his drill and ream for his blades is a little bit telling. And the general lack of addressing design flaws that have been there for decades is, in my opinion, untenable. I mean, really, again, this would be something that if somebody brought that up with me on my knife and I were to build it, I would address that post-haste. I'd get it done in a week. You'd have a rolling design change and that would not be a problem. And that's an easy fix too, by the way. This is not a hard thing to fix because look at this, the back end of the frame here, you've got so much meat where this is not being used. Hell, you can even run a lanyard loop probably through the freaking pocket clip if you wanted to. This is just it's ridiculous. It's unthinkable that a person might leave that there knowing full well that it's an issue. I don't know what they're thinking. I really, really don't. And it's not as if they left it there as like a strap cutter, because no one's going to feed a piece of 550 cord through there and then use like half of a blade or a third of a blade to cut a piece of 550 cord. It's ridiculous. If it is a cord cutter, it is the worst cord cutter I've ever seen. So don't give me that excuse. This is just a design flaw and they're too lazy to address it. Ergonomically, I guess it's fine. I think that the triangular handle does kind of sit a little funky in my hand. I really hate the fact that when I hold onto this, I can feel that lock bar flexing in and out. I don't know if you can see that. You see as I press onto that? You can actually feel that. It's disconcerting. And if you do grab up here, yes, this is actually the more comfortable grip, believe it or not, but this is not a particularly useful grip. And reverse grip is actually the best grip, in my opinion, for this knife. It looks okay. I like the general aesthetic of the SMF. I think it's actually a pretty nice looking knife, but aesthetics aside, I can't forgive the mechanical problems. And so, like I said, all those things mentioned are the reason why I personally would not buy one of these. Again, like I said, I hate to do negative reviews. It does bother me because I know that somebody's livelihood is at stake here. And, but then again, this is Strider. This is a bigger company. If this is a small onesie knife maker or something like that, I would not be doing this, because I think that's really, if you're doing something that jeopardizes a person's livelihood, that's immoral, because people have a right to earn a living. But, at the end of the day, this is something that they could easily correct and fix. That's my constructive criticism for them. Strider doesn't care what I think, though, I'm sure, because they're a pretty big company when it comes to knives. They are much, much, much larger than your average knife maker. We're talking they employ several guys. They probably have a dozen workers working for them. Probably a couple dozen machines, too, milling machines, lathes, etc. So just the way that it is, they are a juggernaut in the industry, so I don't really have too many problems calling out crappy manufacturing and crappy craftsmanship when I see it.